Call us to order. Good evening and welcome to the June 7th, 2022 regular meeting of the Ann Arbor Planning Commission. For detailed information on meeting procedures, please review the full printed meeting agenda, which is available online. Mr. Leonard, will you please call the roll?
Commissioner Mills.
Present.
Commissioner Gibrandl.
Here.
Commissioner Sauvé.
Here.
Commissioner Abrams.
Here.
Commissioner Hammerschmidt.
Here.
Commissioner Dish. Commissioner Lee.
Here.
Commissioner Clark.
Here.
Commissioner Weich.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Very good. Next up is approval of the agenda. Can I have a commissioner move the agenda? Moved by Commissioner Lee, seconded by Commissioner Gibrandl. Any discussion of the agenda? All in favor of the motion, please raise a hand and or say yes. Yes, that's all of the hands. The motion carries. Next are the minutes of the previous meeting. Ms. Gale did send them to us before the meeting, but just before. This is the minutes of the May 17th meeting. Would anyone like to move the minutes? Moved by Commissioner Hammerschmidt, seconded by Commissioner Gibrandl. Any discussion, or people feel like they need to still look at them? All right, seeing nothing, let's, all in favor of the minutes, please raise a hand or say yes. Yes. Very good, that's all of the hands. Next up is item 5, which are the reports from city administration, city council, planning manager, officers and committees, and written communications. Commissioner Dish isn't here tonight, so Mr. Leonard, do you have any updates or provide an update on that?
Yeah, I'm just frantically trying. I was not at the meeting. I think we only had one item, proposed rezoning of 3411 Gettys. No, I apologize. There was a single family annexation that an owner requested. I forget the address, but that was the only thing on the agenda last evening.
All right. Any commissioner officers? Commissioner Gibrandl.
At the DDA Partners Committee, we got a very in-depth report from the head of the AATA. And I think it might behoove us to have him come and do a little presentation on their new, what they have on the ballot for this August, because I learned all kinds of things about their service that I just had no idea about in terms of how, I think it really can affect how we think about how people get here, because there really are all these different kinds of services, and it was really interesting to hear about. So I think it might make sense for us to try to, if it's possible, make that happen before the ballot initiative, because I think that we can also be a way of being able to translate what that's about to others as well, on our other various appointments and things like that. So I would put in a vote for that. I know we have a very full agenda for our working sessions, but I think that it would really be wise of us to be more in touch with the range of services and the kinds of services that they provide now and that they're hoping to provide with the ballot initiative.
Very good, thank you. Any other committee liaisons? Go ahead, Commissioner Lee.
With respect to transportation, last month we talked about the removal of parking on Division, kind of right near Hill, going up to, I want to say it's Madison. It's where we have that kind of like segmented, we have the parking separating the bike lanes, and it's going to go to city council to just remove the parking period. Require city council action because parking is being removed. But I think the overall consensus was that after looking at outcomes analysis, people were parking not within the lanes themselves and creating kind of like traffic pattern issues. So that design is getting, I think, altered and going to city council. So aside from that, actually AATA is obviously going to the ballot, so I do think that is something important. Making sure that we have land use and transportation being aligned in that respect. Aside from that, there's a few other kind of infrastructure level projects that we talked about, but I think the most important one was the Division. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other? Go ahead, Mr. Leonard.
I would just also add the Transportation Commission also reviewed and endorsed the proposed parking amendments that the Planning Commission proffered.
Very good. ORC did meet 2 weeks ago. We had an early conversation with Mr. Leonard about including sustainability within the UDC. So we talked about electrification, solar readiness, kind of helped think through what some options might be. And I'm expecting that we'll see that back to the full committee-ish soon. Yeah, great. Soonish.
I like that.
Great. Anything else? No, then we can move on. There were some communications in our packets about a range of different topics, some TC1, many TC1, but others as well. So we are on to item 6 then, which is the first opportunity for public comment. Persons have the opportunity to speak for up to 3 minutes about an issue that's not listed as a public hearing on this agenda. We'll first call on individuals who are present here in council chambers to address the commission, and then remote participants. To speak during the public hearing, if you're joining remotely, please press *9 if you're listening by phone, or use the raised hand feature if you're viewing through the web link. For phone access, call 877-853-5247, and then enter meeting ID 977-6634-1226. Mr. Leonard will select those who have raised their hand using the last 3 digits of your telephone number or calling your name if you've joined through Zoom. You'll hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak, and when speaking, please move to a quiet area and mute any television or background sounds so that we can hear you clearly. For either method of participation, please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments. Is there anyone here that would like to provide public comment? Mr. Garber.
Thank you, Chair Mills. Ken Garber, 28 Haverhill Court. I'm going to talk about building electrification yet again. Let me read you some petitioner quotes from recent meetings. Quote, this is from Maple Cove 2 architect about the owner. Quote, it's still a long ways off in his thinking to make a commitment, but he is not objecting to doing electrification. It is one option he is considering, end quote. On 212 Miller, we'll be looking at everything as we get further into the project. 330 Detroit Street, we honestly are not sure what we will be using for our heating and cooling system. We're working through it. Notice the pattern? Deflection, not discussion. No one wants to talk about upfront costs, lifetime ROI, supply chain issues, energy use intensity, coefficients of performance. Information that would be useful to commission, to staff, and to the public. That's because to engage in this discussion would be to legitimize it. When they say it's too soon to talk, what they're really saying is it's none of your business how we heat our buildings. You can bring up parking, stormwater, setbacks, curb cuts, but stay out of our basement mechanical room. They have a point. This is not a zoning issue. It's a building code issue. It's to this commission's great credit that it does push electrification, and you are exploring amending the UDC. I am grateful for that, personally. But electrification is not some nice extra. It is not an option. It is not something we hope developers consider when they get around to drawing up their final plans. It's official city policy as of June 1st, 2020. That's when Council approved the 820 plan. Strategy 2, Action 1 of the plan on page 32 includes the following assumption, quote, all new residential and commercial buildings are designed and built to operate without the use of natural gas, end quote. We may not always have the authority to enforce it, but it's there. We are failing. Maple Cove 2, 212 Miller, and 330 Detroit together will put 1,187 metric ton CO2 equivalent emissions a year into the atmosphere if they use gas. That figure takes into account the hybrid dual fuel pump system at 212 Miller, which actually only reduces gas emissions by maybe 10%. For perspective, those nearly 1,200 tons wipe out most of the emission savings from the 2 megawatts of new solar installed through the city's solarized group buying program. Installing solar is self-defeating when at the same time we're locking in gas for the next half century. The climate does not respond to good intentions or to symbolic acts or to carbon neutrality targets. It only responds to one thing, and that's the raw physics. How much CO2 and other greenhouse gases we dump into the atmosphere. That's it, nothing more.
Thank you. Mr. Leonard, are there any callers online that have indicated an interest in speaking?
There are not.
All right, we'll move on to the next item, which is number 7, the public hearings that are scheduled for our next regular meeting.
We have no new public hearing scheduled for the 23rd.
Do we currently have anything else that we're expecting to return?
Not currently.
Okay, very good. So
Potentially an AATA presentation.
I was actually thinking that, but maybe not in person. Anyway, okay. To be talked about later. Okay, item 8 then is regular business. So 8A is 340 Depot Street site plan and planned unit development rezoning. While Mr. Leonard is bringing in the petitioners, I will remind folks that the petitioners will have up to 10 minutes to provide a presentation. Then we'll have a staff report and the public hearing before commission discussion of the item. Hello, Mr. Kowalski.
Good evening. I think we were going to lead off with the petitioner's presentation first.
We will, yep, and I was just wanting to see, do we have everybody?
Sorry.
Mr. Nims, do you have everybody that you're expecting, or is it just you?
It's just me and Mr. Hirsch from Midwestern Consulting.
Great,
And I believe he's on.
okay. And does everybody do you need to share slides? Do you have that ability?
Yeah, I think so. Let me just. Oh, I'm still disabled from screen sharing.
I think Brett may have to give them permission.
There we go.
There we go.
Can you guys see that?
We
Yes.
can. All
Okay,
right.
great. It's been about a year since we were before everybody previously to discuss this project. I was just going to take a moment to kind of go through where we started and now where we ended up, and then turn it back over to Matt for his report. But we're looking at 340 Depot. It's directly south of the train station. We have the master plan zoning, which calls for this entire block between Depot and Summit for central commercial office. We are looking to have this rezoned PUD due to some conflicting land use buffers and to alleviate some of the requirements of the C1B front setback as well to better align with the city master plan goals. The current zoning is C1B for our parcel. The parcel directly south of us, the Garnet, which is under construction right now, was previously rezoned as PUD for residential use. Part of the reason we're seeking the PUD, or the major reason we're seeking the PUD is due to these 15-foot conflicting land use buffer setbacks. And that's not because the zoning itself is something that requires a conflicting land use, but the residential use of the properties to the east and to the south of us require that 15-foot setback. And when we capture that along with the 10-foot setback that is required for C1B in the zoning, we end up with a really kind of minute buildable area of about 3,400 square feet. There is an existing building on the site. It is non-conforming. You can see that it is set back significantly from the street. It is not meeting height requirements, not meeting massing requirements. And so we're seeking to remove that and redevelop. When we met about a year ago, I think it was June 22nd, we came forward with this main level plan. We had 10 parking spaces, some small retail and small office use with access way from the public sidewalk back into a residential lobby and core with single stair and elevator to access 4 residential units up on the second level. In that meeting, we talked about a lot of things. I think it was a really productive meeting, and we came back after hearing what everybody said, which was really about a reduction in parking, seeking some more sustainable goals with the property, and offering something that activated the sidewalk more significantly than we were doing by having the parking along the front, and reconfigured the first floor layout to involve about 650 square feet of retail along the street with a patio We'll get to some images later and talk about how we activated that area. About 750 square feet of office. That residential core mostly remains the same. We also split access between ramps and stairs, and then created covered patio space within the building envelope itself, but also exterior patio space elevated above a retaining or at a retaining wall that's about 2 feet above the sidewalk plane. This retaining wall is really important because the floodplain map designated by this blue line is drawn to that existing retaining wall when they came and redid the FEMA floodplain maps. So this portion of the retaining wall is going to remain. We might rebuild it in place, but the footprint will mostly remain unchanged, and we're shortening it slightly to accommodate these different modes of access from the sidewalk into the development. From that discussion, we kept the 4 main units on the upper level, just one level of units, about 775 square feet for the 1-bedroom units, about 1,300 square feet for the 2-bed. This unit did get a little bit larger than it was previously. Previously, we kind of came straight across from this little recess here, but just in working through some of the logistics and wanting to offer a more substantial unit type outside of the 1-bedrooms, we accommodated this 1,300 square foot 2-bedroom. That also came in conjunction with the addition of a 3rd floor patio, roof access, and 2,000 square feet of green roof to be applied to help with, and Ted can talk to some of the numbers if we want, our first flush and our stormwater requirements to help slow some of that stormwater runoff on the property. So the building continues to, move and evolve as things do. We're maintaining the 650 square feet of retail and the 750 square feet of office. Most of this is unchanged. We have included one EV installed for these 2 spaces here, EV ready to cover the rest of the spaces, which will exceed the minimum requirements that the parcel will need. We have Class A bike parking located over here. I think this is noted as Class C, but it will have a small canopy that covers it, so I think it might count as Class B bicycle parking along the front, and then some more Class A bike parking for the residences stuffed in the back. Again, the upper floor units, they'll all have ample balconies along the north face. We're indicating some windows to let some daylight into the hallway. That's something we're still kind of playing with. We're still showing this little recess here, but this is the increase of that 2nd floor unit. And again, the roof patio with 2,000 square feet of green roof at a minimum to help mitigate some of that storm runoff. Surrounding character, we tried to work within it's a low density area, mostly single story, directly adjacent to us. Kind of an industrial look to a lot of the buildings. It is kind of a semi-historic area. We have Lower Town and Carytown as adjoining neighborhoods. The Garnet directly to the south of us. And the building that we're proposing, which we think keeps in scale with the surrounding buildings, helps to meet a few of the master plan goals of the city by being able to shift this forward to within 4 feet of the property line and get a massing volume that is more in line with where we feel the city is trying to go, and also adding a mix of residential unit types to fill kind of a needed gap for that smaller unit size for rent. So this is a view from the northeast. This is showing the patio that will serve the retail, but also how there's a plan to design this rail to fold down into seats, so that will allow a momentary respite place for pedestrians along the sidewalk. Just a view existing conditions of that non-conforming building from the east, and how we would propose to bring that more into alignment. View from the northwest. View from the bridge. I know we talked about this a little bit, how we'll have views of that green roof up on the top. And I think that's something that owners are feeling very confident about. And then just a couple more shots. So this is, we can see the sidewalk and the stair entry separations. This will be the office portion with the retail portion behind these windows over in this area. And a view from the west. And finally, a dusk view indicating some of the lighting that is proposed, all down lighting that'll comply with the dark sky policies that the city is trying to adopt. I don't know if Ted wants to speak for a moment about.
Yeah, can everyone hear me?
We can, go ahead.
Yep.
Yeah, so pretty simple as far as utilities. All of the public infrastructure in Depot Street is going to be utilized, tapping the existing sanitary and water main. The one little bit unique aspect would be that the neighbor, 320 Depot Street, has an existing water service lead that crosses the frontage of 340 Depot Street. So as part of the project, that connection will be eliminated, and they'll have a new connection that gets taken straight out to Depot Street along their frontage. As far as storm, David had mentioned earlier that the project proposes a green roof, so that'll be handling the first flush stormwater management requirements, and we'll be outletting the Depot Street. There'll be some new storm sewer constructed out in the curb lines, connects to some existing storm sewer to the east. And then we just have this last slide here to kind of illustrate in that pink hatched area is where the existing water lead for 320 Depot Street runs right now, and it actually is within kind of peculiar easement that the project is proposing to be abandoned. So there's an existing retaining wall to help deal with the grade change from the street and the sidewalk to the site, and essentially the project is going to be reconstructing that retaining wall in the same exact place it's at. So in order to comply with city standards and not having retaining walls and other features in an easement for public right-of-way, the project proposes to have that vacated, that portion vacated. So we've discussed that with staff, and it won't impact the sidewalk. It won't impact the public's use of the actual right-of-way on Depot Street. It just kind of cleans up some of the stuff on the existing parcel.
And I think this is a good place to note, we don't have a map and we don't have a quantified amount offhand. This site historically was owned by DTE, and they operated a coke plant on it. So a couple of times in the past, DTE has come in and removed some soils from the north side of the property. They've also come in and removed some soils from the south side of the property. They continue to monitor it, and it is on their list. They suspect there's contaminated soils underneath the building, but they don't have access to them. So as part of this redevelopment, and this is outlined in the PUD, there will be remediation to those soils consistent with state guidelines to remove those to whatever extent necessary.
We have reached 10 minutes just for the chair's. Oh.
Very good. Thank you very much. Mr. Kowalski, anything to add?
Sure. Good evening, everybody. Well, I'll just, they did a great job summarizing up the details of the actual project. What I'll just touch on a little bit are what we have in the supplemental regulations. As I'm sure all planning commission is aware, as a PUD, it has its own set of supplemental regulations, basically its own zoning district that we have written for this project in particular. So a couple of these, but with that, with the PUD, there's some findings that staff and ultimately planning commission would have to agree with in order to approve the PUD. Well, and ultimately city council in order to approve the PUD. Those are outlined in the supplemental regulations. I was just going to read those, the more detailed ones, just really quickly, so we can, for anybody listening in the audience as well that may not have access to that. So, and these are, again, some of the noted findings of the PUD. And I mean, you could call them the public benefits, but those are the items that, again, we, in exchange for some of this flexibility we're giving them, these are some of the things we get back. So, again, a small-scale mixed-use project providing a minimum of 1,300 square feet of office or retail use on the first floor. Again, those are things that are outlined in the supplemental regulations, that the first floor would remain retail or office use. The land use by reducing the parking and using that floor area to provide retail or office uses instead, that will help activate that street front. Again, that was something that came out of PC suggestion from your original pre-PUD conference. Activation of that ground floor through the reduced front setback, bringing that back. The code, as you saw in the previous diagram, would push the building back, 10 feet. And again, while they're proposing up to 4 feet in that area, it's very consistent with that, with the surrounding streetscape. Many of those buildings are right at the front property line. The minimum of a 2,000 square foot of vegetated roof to assist with stormwater, as well as any heat island effects. The design aesthetics consistent with the neighborhood, buildings designed and materials consistent with the surrounding area, and high quality materials. They say not the, and again, what we've got locked in, the elevations that are provided for you will be.
I think, Mr. Kowalski, there you go.
Did I just mute somehow?
You did. You left us at high-quality materials-ish.
Oh.
If you want to go
Sorry,
back to that bullet.
Okay, thank you. I don't know how I haven't apologized. And really the last one was already previously mentioned, was the environmental remediation. I mean, obviously they can do some around the building with the existing building being there, that would make that part difficult. The other things that I wanted to touch on, so, and the permitted uses, again, other than kind of restricting that first floor use, they are kind of open to other flexibilities within the general C1B, what's allowed within that C1B district as far as retail uses, office uses, and obviously residential. One other thing I wanted to touch on, because we did put it as it was mentioned briefly by Mr. Hirsch, I believe, as part of the project, which is a bit of a vacation, it's not quite a street vacation. Well, it's not a street vacation. It's a right-of-way vacation in the front of it of the 4 feet of kind of an extra public right-of-way that we have, but that has been discussed up engineering, and they do support that vacating of that 4 feet. It's not consistent with the surrounding area, so I even had a meeting just about 2 hours before this to discuss that. It ultimately will have to go to city council for final approval of that vacation, but and that would be something that would have to be done before building permits. But I will be following up with the petitioner after this, and we will get that process moving. I mean, it's possible to even, well, I'm not sure. It may be possible to get it synced up with this project as it goes to, as this project, as you know, has to go to council because it's rezoning as well as a site plan. So if it's not hooked up directly with that, it would be shortly after that. And ideally with staff's support, that vacation would be approved and obviously the project could go forward. So that really summarizes up my presentation at this time. And of course I am available for any questions, and staff is recommending approval of the project. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, at this time, I will open the public hearing. This is an opportunity for persons to speak for up to 3 minutes about the 340 Depot PUD zoning district and site plan, which will be for city council approval. We'll first call on individuals here that are in council chambers and then remote participants. Again, if you have already dialed in, you can press *9 if you're listening by phone. You can use the raised hand feature if you're viewing through the web link, or you can call now at 877-853-5247 and enter meeting ID 977-6634-1226. Mr. Leonard will select those who have raised their hand. When speaking, please move to a quiet area and mute any background sound so that we can hear you clearly. Please also state your name and address at the beginning of your comments. Anyone here like to participate in the public hearing?
Thank you again, Chair Mills. Ken Garber again. There are benefits to this PUD, including 4 housing units, some office or retail, one installed EV parking space, and some likely soil cleanup. I don't see affordable housing or an affordable housing contribution. I can't find a sustainability review from OSI in the documents. But I will focus on the green roof and on electrification. Green roofs are great. They insulate and reduce heat loss. They absorb CO2 and they retain stormwater. But let's quantify the emissions from 340 Depot. There was a study recently in the journal Aerosol and Air Quality Research analyzing a state-of-the-art green roof in Wuxi, China, which has a hot summer, cold winter climate. That green roof absorbs, and I apologize for the numbers, 1.79 kilograms CO2 per square meter annually, and emission savings from lower energy use come to 9.35 kilograms CO2 per square meter. 340 Depot will have 2,000 square feet of vegetated roof, or 186 square meters. Applying the Wuxi Group's figures, this roof should prevent about 2 tons of CO2 emissions annually. Now, I calculate that heating 340 Depot with gas will generate 64 tons annual CO2 equivalent emissions without the green roof. That's based on average Michigan consumption figures from the American Gas Association and EIA figures for the retail. The green roof will only reduce these 64 tons CO2 by 2 tons, or 3%. To get at the other 97%, this building really has to go all electric. And maybe it will. Mr. Hirsch, in his January 14th letter to the city, wrote, quote, "The owner, project architect, and MEP team continue to review this opportunity for this project. However, they are not able to fully commit to an electric energy-only project," end quote. Let's hope it's still on the table. But don't accept another "it's too early to decide" deflection. In your packet are the notes from the citizen participation meeting on October 7th, where architect Wayne Chubb said, quote, "We are investigating an all-electric building," end quote. That was 8 months ago. How much more time do they need? Again, the climate does not respond to good intentions or symbolic gestures. It only responds to the hard reality of the physics. The green roof is great, but it doesn't make 340 Depot sustainable or make it conform to 820. If the petitioner doesn't know how to go all electric, they should talk to Ryan Tobias of Jackson Dearborn Partners or architect John Majewski, the team putting up 2111 Packard. The petitioner should commit tonight to a fully electric building using efficient heat pump system. If not, I suggest you vote no on the motion. Grounds would be City Code Chapter 55, Section 52910, Paragraph 3B. The development does not comply with all local standards, in this case, Strategy 2, Action 1 of the 820 plan adopted by Council in 2020. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Leonard, is there anyone who's joined remotely indicating an interest in speaking? And again, if you've joined, you can press *9 to raise your hand or use the raised hand button, which is in the bottom of your screen.
Nobody indicating a desire to speak. I do know, I would like to note, though, that I did forward a communication just a few moments ago that we did receive earlier in the day on this application that will be amended to your packet. If you haven't had a chance, I'd advise make sure you skim that as well.
Very good, thank you. All right, seeing no one else, I'll close the public hearing and I will read the motion. The Ann Arbor City Planning Commission hereby recommends that the mayor and city council approve the 340 Depot Planned Unit Development Zoning District and Supplemental Regulations and the PUD site plan with the following condition. The additional 4 feet of right-of-way referenced in L3978 P810 is an easement for public right-of-way is vacated by city council prior to issuance of building permits. Can I have a commissioner move that? Moved by Commissioner Sauvé, seconded by Commissioner Gibrandl. Who wants to kick off discussion or questions? No one does. Commissioner Gibrandl.
I guess I would just like the petitioner to respond to what the public comment that we got from Mr. Garber, especially in regards to kind of quotes from the past about exploring electrification as a possibility and where the team is now after the 8 months' time.
I could speak to that briefly. The owner has been reluctant to pursue any further engineering on the project due to the fact that he was uncertain as to how these initial hearings would go. So we spent the time reshaping the property to incorporate a lot of the things we heard outside of the scope that would involve engineering, which would give us those results. I know it's not the answer you guys want to hear, but it hasn't gone away. It's just something we haven't started to look at thoroughly yet with costs and everything, because the owner wanted some guarantees before he took on the extra costs of pursuing that step.
Other comments or questions? People are quiet tonight. Go ahead, Commissioner Lee.
I don't know if people have read the the email that just came through regarding the Garnets, the detrimental impact to views, noise, etc. Do we have somebody that could speak to the accuracy of their concerns about correcting public record and also its impacts to the Garnet, whether that's to staff or to the petitioner? I'm not sure who that question goes to.
Let's start with Mr. Kowalski. I think he received that correspondence earlier today, but I will start that I think one of the comment was about, was concluding detrimental. And, to be clear, I think that is an interpretation rather than a defined code manner. But I would note that one of the specific planning and development modifications that is being proposed here is a reduction of the conflicting land use buffer, which would provide a little bit more separation. However, in both cases of the building that's under construction now and this one, it is obviously an intensification of development of that area.
The only thing I would add just briefly, sorry, I don't actually have a lot of more information. I did discuss this with the petitioner earlier, so I would ask if either Mr. Nims or Mr. Hirsch would want to respond to that as well.
Yeah, so we talked about this email, as Matt mentioned. What we can assess is, as I noted in the presentation, the unit on the west side of the building grew by about 200 square feet, and it grew towards the south property line. Previously, as I kind of noted, where we had that recess in the middle, it went straight across with just a small bump, and so it kind of came about 6 feet closer by aligning itself with the lower level building that defines the parking. And I believe that's what they're referencing, because formerly that was not there, and the point at which we met the south property line, from what we could tell from the Garnet plans, was going to align mostly with their elevator core and their stair core that also abutted the property line on that side.
So the PUD that we're talking about would make it closer, basically, by eliminating that conflicting land use buffer. Understood. I mean, I think that happens with densification, frankly, that at least in my viewpoint. So I certainly do understand. Overall, let me talk broadly and generally. I think they listened to the comments that we had when this came to us last about the orientation of the site, the removal of parking, as well as the activation of the sidewalk through putting retail kind of forward. So to that effect, I applaud the architects in thinking the orientation of the site, and I do think that this looks overall pretty good, and to be responsive to the concerns that we had last time. That being said, I understand the costs associated with pulling, a mechanical, electrical, engineering drawing set relative to schematic design. However, obviously this isn't exactly new. I mean, we talk about this literally every meeting, so I guess forgive me for saying it is somewhat still. I don't know if disappointment's the right word, but to have a more robust, substantive answer and engagement with that question would have been preferable. But that being said, I overall stepping back, thank you for addressing that. Again, detrimental, I think, is kind of a big word. Or, I mean, I think it's a kind of a salient word for somebody that's evaluating the purchase of a condo in the Garnet. As far as noise mitigation, hopefully that they can minimize the impacts on the nearby uses. But overall, the activation from people traveling by train, and one of the things that I thought of is, based on utilization, let's try to advocate for kind of a crosswalk so that people have an easy way to cross. But aside from that, I do appreciate the petitioner listening to what we had to say and then reorienting the site in that regard. So I think I'll leave it there for now and yield the rest of my time. Thanks.
Other comments? Commissioner Weich.
I just want to echo Commissioner Lee. I think you actually said everything I was going to say, so I'll just highlight it again, which is I really appreciate the petitioner taking into consideration the comments of the Planning Commission and the activation of the first level creation of that patio, as well as the elimination of the parking spots. The only other concern I have is the same concern that Mr. Garber shared during his public comments, was just sort of renewable energy uses for the building. And I think the petitioner has responded. It's not a, well, I'll just leave it at that they've responded. But I did want to acknowledge my additional appreciation of all of the changes to the site plan and the PUD from our first presentation.
I'll third that, and say that I look forward to this coming to fruition. I'll be even more excited if in your mechanicals you're able to, once those plans are developed, it is an all-electric building. I think that that would be fantastic. I typically, because I'm a nerd and like to look at the code, I think through what are we seeing that in the pictures that the PUD doesn't necessarily capture, the regulations don't necessarily capture. And I think actually this hews very closely to what the site plan includes. My sense is in terms of, it's very clear that there shall not be more than 6 vehicle parking spots. Like, those are the kind of things that I think about. It's very clear that they need to have at least 8 Class A bikes and 4 Class C bike spots. The EV parking is in here. What's the current floor area? In the regulations, it's 8,000 square feet. What is proposed? Mr. Kowalski or the petitioner, do you know?
It's roughly 7,000, I have the exact number, 7,830 square feet of floor area.
700, 830.
Okay.
So within the PUD, we did max FAR of 8,000, a little bit of wiggle room there.
And I think that that's great. And I was going to say, like, there is no height limit here. I mean, practically speaking, like, you're going to have a height limit. I mean, I would actually, in some ways, be okay with additional flexibility. I think we talked last time about adding on the potential to add on another story, not asking for a redesign by any means, but allowing for that flexibility. I just want to note that that's probably not in here. Highlight that for other people. In terms of, let's see, I think, Mr. Kowalski, thank you for noting that the PUD regs require office or retail on the first floor. But I think, and want to highlight that there is some flexibility. It could all be retail, it could all be office, and allowing for that flexibility, I think, is wise. But in case anybody is dead set on having a party store or something here, or coffee shop, maybe we won't, hopefully we get it, maybe we won't. I just thought I would highlight that for my colleagues. And the thing that I thought was interesting, that is among the reasons why PUDs are, I think, why our code says that they, they're only to be used in certain circumstances. Item G talks about the materials, and effectively, says brick, cast stone, metal plates, glass, that's shown on this site plan. And so I feel like that's tying them in to a particular material use that if there's ever redevelopment, again, they're still going to be held to that. And I think that what's in the plan is beautiful, and I think it'll be great. I was just thinking about what this is next, and maybe these things all are things that I think would last a while, but anyway, that just struck me. Overall, again, I'm comfortable in establishing a PUD district with these criteria. I think that what we're seeing is likely what we'll get. And I would just say, I would even be comfortable offering additional flexibility for the future. But I would imagine that that's also going to run into implications with neighbors as well. So, Commissioner Abrams, I saw your hand maybe before I started talking, or just as I started talking.
But also I see Mr. Kowalski's hand up. You go,
Oh,
go
sorry.
Ahead. You go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I did want to add a clarification, something that I meant to mention earlier, and it's directly related to the floor area. In conversations, this had come up a couple of months ago or so regarding the environmental remediation, that the petitioner, and we just talked about it again today, would like to have the option to, if enough of it has to be excavated out, to enable to add a basement. And we do count basements as floor areas, so in those discussions, I wanted to mention that to Planning Commission that we can as a PUD, I can write in, with the maximum 8,000 square feet, not including basement floor area, or we could put in maybe a limitation on that if Planning Commission so felt that would work in that direction, or we could just up maybe the maximum floor area to accommodate a basement if it's possible. But again, Mr. Nims may be able to add a little bit to that, but in our conversations, it's not 100% sure, but depending on the environmental contamination, as I said, and what needs to be removed, excavation, there could be a basement in the building. So I neglected to mention that earlier, I apologize. So I just wanted to lend that at this point in case that has influence on anybody's discussion or questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt, for touching on that point. The basement wouldn't be allowed to be above 3,000 square feet due to the fact that we would just carry one stair down and the elevator down. That being said, we don't want to get into a situation where we're supporting cars underneath basement, so we probably would only isolate it to the office wing portion of the building, and I think that's probably around 1,200 square feet. I don't know off the top of my head. But yeah, given that we're not sure how much soil has to come out, if we were to go down far enough, the owner would be amenable to having the option of that additional space available in the building.
Thank you. And so again, with that, for Planning Commission, we can kind of set a limit at your suggestion, or we can work with the petitioner afterwards before we get the council to kind of work out whether or not you guys feel if we want to put a limitation on there, or just a basement floor area exempt. So additional for discussion.
Great. I'm cool with either one, either just overall increasing the floor area or saying that the basement doesn't count. Again, I think just increasing overall the square footage allowed gives more flexibility. But I welcome others' opinions too. Now, Commissioner Abrams.
I just wanted to briefly ask a follow-up question on the question of building electrification, and maybe Mr. Nims could say whether, I understand that the engineering has not yet been completed, but I wondered if you would feel comfortable giving us more information about the intention as you move into that process, and whether electrification is something you plan to pursue and would only abandon, under extreme circumstances, or whether, it's a icing on the cake.
Yeah, I think there's a fair amount of confidence in systems for the residential units that are electric. It's more the retail components that in our really preliminary discussions have led to, well, does this make the space less viable to somebody if they're trying to lease it? So that's kind of where the conversations have really stalled. Because we hadn't pursued engineering and started to look at any of those initial costs for and life cycle costs of or for the building.
Okay, but what I think I'm hearing is that the intention is to pursue electrification if possible.
Yeah, I don't think the owner has. Yeah, if it's financially feasible for them to pursue it, they don't have any issues with pursuing it. And we just have to evaluate these other factors still with them.
Okay, thank you. And then my other question, I think, is for staff. I have not had a chance to really look at this email that just came in, so I feel like I'm kind of playing a little bit of catch up. But just so I understand, the question is about both the Garnet and this building being built up to the property line and the distance between them. Is that correct? Or go ahead, Commissioner Lee.
Yeah, because I spoke about this earlier, if I could respond directly to that.
Sure.
Well, so I did have the opportunity while this discussion was happening to take a look at what they were saying. Look at the second floor plate on the north side of the Garnet. And the units there have a balcony in the bedroom units on the first, I think, and second floor that are basically going to have, just a complete wall built up right to it. So what they were saying is that overall the development seems to be good for the city, but it is not accurate to call it with no detrimental impact to the adjacent property or neighboring owners. So I do want to, earlier I said, I think it's a byproduct of density. I do want to recognize that it would be helpful to see kind of that north-south axonometric and or aerial. I think that the person, the sectional that they were asking for. So I was actually, the petitioner, is there any response to the Garnet's northern balconies on the second floor that would be adversely impacted by this?
So I think I cut out for just a second there. If I caught everything, I don't know if I can share my screen again? That might be the easiest. Is that okay to do?
Yeah, absolutely. Go for it.
Okay. Let me just get back to the page. So I gotta get back to the floor plan. So we don't have, let me get to the site plan, that might show it better. So this green line is a slight error. It should be over at this column line. In our study, we didn't have full plans of the Garnet. We just knew, we gathered their footprint. I think there's a bedroom located here with a balcony, so that happens at this recess. So I think they're about 5 feet setback from the property line currently. We will be roughly 8 feet back, so there's about 13 feet between where that first balcony will be and where this recess occurs. I believe there's some overlap in the second balcony in this zone that will not be at that 13-foot distance. And then they still have their large balcony facing west, so we're not necessarily encumbering that, but there is a small window, I believe, in their living unit that would be abutting, at where this wall was stepped back to, if that's answering the question.
I do think that sufficiently answered the question. So the public commenter, Daniel Marquard's concern that public records should be corrected to reflect that there is somewhat of a negative impact specifically on that unit, I think it's a fair comment. But again, so hopefully that responds to your question. as you were saying, hey, what's happening here? So I think it's just that northwest unit with it looks like it's on the second bedroom. You pulled up the right one there, Sarah. It's right there. Oh, nope, you were at the right one. So overall, it still doesn't detract from me for my recommendation or my sense that the PUD seems appropriate and that the overall comments have been heard. But I do want to obviously recognize the public commenters' position that there is going to be some level of adverse impact to those two particular balconies, which really won't be very functional at that point in time.
Commissioner Abrams, do you have more questions for staff or, okay. Commissioner Gibrandl.
Personally, I feel like that's, it is a detriment to those people, but I think that like any building downtown, if you don't own it, then, and you're in the lower part of it, then it's part of city life. And I know that stinks for the people that have that unit, but any building that is up against, the zoning allows greater height, frankly, and it was the Garnet's risk to have an orientation in that direction, knowing that it could be built on this side. So that's kind of how I feel about it, that I'm sorry for those particular people, but I think that's just the way the cookie crumbles when you're building in an urban environment. And I guess I also just want to piggyback on the electrification thing, again, knowing that I know we are limited in this range in terms of what we can ask for. You had indicated in the beginning that the owner sort of wanted some sense of security, and it seems based on the conversation tonight that we are giving you a sense of security. And so I would hope that in your pursuit of this, as the building develops further, that if that's truly the reason, that you would actually explore this in an authentic way in terms of the reality of what we're dealing with our society. So we can only hope that you can do your part, I guess is what I would say, because we can't ask it of you, but we hope that you will rise to the occasion to be able to be a part of solutions that we are grasping at, frankly, at this point. So.
Go ahead, Commissioner Sauvé. And then Mr. Leonard.
Okay. I'll just add a comment to the residential use versus residential zoning. And I think this has come up a few times in projects. And when we talk about residential use for those conflicting land use buffers, it's typically in more commercial zoning in urban, centric zoning properties. And so, not to add to our commission proposed business, but it seems like this is kind of the line where residential and those buffers are appropriate, and where the kind of urban corridors and centers really maybe don't have this, because really what it's saying is the first mover gets the most land and everybody else has to move away because of it. And what we're seeing here is a small site trying to get units to happen and having to ask for this PUD to make room for it to happen because the other properties got to it first. And then I don't see the kind of equality of development within that kind of standard. So I'm just going to kind of put that on record as something I would like to see and continue in conversation, what the difference is between a use and a zoning expectation for some of our ordinances. To the max area, I would also like to offer up into the calculation, if the parking is not included and the open air covered patio is not included, that both of those be included in potential square footage areas in case they do want to enclose those for get rid of parking and have a bigger restaurant dining room for their 650 square feet or things like that. So again, adaptive reuse, it would not be any more kind of building form, but could give more room for square footage in the future. So I would be open to that as well.
Mr. Leonard.
Thank you. I just want to clarify the use of the word detrimental, why you're seeing it in the staff report. One of the findings for the Planning Commission of the city to establish a PUD is the conclusion that it is not having a detrimental impact on surrounding properties. And so I think appropriately your conversation here in response to that commenter is trying to figure out what is the commission's evaluation of that, and does it rise to that level of, to what extent is it impact to adjacent properties, and at what point is that too excessive where it does create a detrimental effect. So I just want to be clear. It goes a little bit back to my comment about the use of that term. That is somewhat of a term of art to the commission and the city as to the impact to surrounding properties. But I do want to be clear that if the commission finds that that is clearly detrimental, that is a potential standard that would not be qualified for the issuance of a plan unit development. So I just wanted to make sure that remind the commission, the applicant, and the public that that term is included in our report as an evaluation of that standard. It's not an arbitrary term by any stretch.
And staff's assessment is that this is not detrimental. And I think, personally, I would concur with that assessment. I think we do need to sort out the floor area. And I think that I appreciate Commissioner Sauvé, as always, your comment about, I assume right now the parking area is not included in the floor area.
Correct.
So if they realized that nobody wanted to bring their car there and that they wanted to expand the office use, they couldn't, or the retail use, they couldn't right now, which I want to make sure that we give the buffer for that to happen in the future. And so in my mind, if this lot is 6,500 square feet, like doubling that, it's a two-story building plus there's that third access to the patio on the third floor. I don't know if that is counting in floor area.
Yes, the penthouse area, correct.
Yeah, and then we talked about potentially having a basement. I mean, I'm not sure what's, in my mind, 3 times 6,500 with 19,500. Yeah, okay. I was like, okay. That seems reasonable to me, like to allow for that potential flexibility. Again, there's a lot of other things constraining this site, so and if we get more units someday, that's not going to hurt my feelings at all. But I don't know what others think. Or staff, that's like, what are you guys thinking? Like, what are the negative consequences of that? Yeah. Go ahead, Mr. Kowalski, or Mr. Leonard's thinking. Commissioner Sauvé wants to chime in, so.
Well, I'll let somebody else chime in first.
I'll just put my architect hat on and say that with one egress stair, you can only do 4 units. So they'd have to, like, if the parking went away, they added another egress to add a full third floor of residential, it would probably impede a renovation of that corner unit as well. So just in terms of like fears of the addition, there's building code requirements of egress that would impact more of the core as well.
So you're not so worried that this
I'm not so worried that this is going to be a solid 3-story building in the future because of the additional code requirements.
Staff reactions, other commissioner reactions?
I think as far as staff, we can certainly, again, there's enough other, typically what cautions we would look for, the parking, but again, that would be flexed in here. I would have to double check to see, yes, we do have no minimum, okay. I wanted to check to see make sure I worded the parking requirements but it says no minimum, so that would be correct. They could fill that in. I would review, but I don't think there's anything else within the supplemental regulations, but I could do that offline that would be affected by any additional floor area. And absolutely, I mean, that would definitely increase the flexibility of the project, and they are fairly limited in where they can go anyway. We can also cap the height directly again, I don't think there's any intention to go higher than the 3 stories, but that could be the limiting factor as well. If Planning Commission wanted to cap that height exactly where it's at right now, and we can add the additional floor area within that building envelope. But I don't see necessarily any other issues with that, but I would review the supplemental regulations, again, just to make sure.
Mr. Leonard, do you have any feedback, or do you want, like, I know we need to have a motion to amend. Would you like it to be flexible to say, like, figure out the right floor area?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure that out. I'm a little worried about the math at this point. I guess what I am thinking is, what I'm hearing from the commission is that the supplemental regs might be modified to say that there's a maximum parking location, or that space could be reclaimed for floor area. The patio, we could include similar language that the outdoor patio could be utilized for floor area. And then I think there was a reference to, probably because of some of those same building code egress requirements, probably the most that we're going to gain is in the basement is 3,000 square feet. So maybe it is upping the maximum square footage by 3,000 square feet and making it clear that regardless of that level, the existing parking and patio could also be converted into floor area space. How's that sound to you, Mr. Kowalski?
Yes, thank you. I think that would be a good idea. We could make those calculations, and it still gives them that flexibility going forward. So,
Yeah,
absolutely.
that seems to be the closest to the intention of what I'm hearing from the Planning Commission. I just want to be honest that in progressing, if this is approved by Planning Commission, goes to City Council, if like in conversations with the Attorney's Office, we think it's better just to up that cap, then we would probably go through that exercise and just calculate what those areas are and make that adjustment. And then we would communicate to the City Council that that was slightly different from what was adopted at this table.
The result would be the same, so.
Right. Anyone want to move what how do you want us to articulate what that amendment would be?
The motion would be to modify the supplemental regulations to accomplish the following. Add up to 3,000 square feet of additional floor area, period. Clearly allow, on top of that, the conversion of the existing parking area into floor area, as well as the outdoor patio.
And I would say the covered outdoor patio that we're talking about. Like, we still want the one along
Yeah.
the street, but the covered outdoor patio.
Covered outdoor patio. Okay.
That sounds good. Does anyone want to move that? Moved by Commissioner Abrams, seconded by Commissioner Sauvé. That sounds good to me. Any discussion of that? Commissioner Lee.
Thank you. I just want to make sure I understand. So we're trying to provide the petitioner with the flexibility to convert in the 6 parking spaces to rentable square footage within the PUD. Is it appropriate for me to ask what the petitioner thinks/feels about that? I'd like to get their feedback. They're a stakeholder, right?
Yeah, I mean, the intention is to give them more flexibility. They can build exactly what's seen, but
Yeah.
yes, you may.
Just want to make sure that I want to make sure I understand, and I think I do, and also just want to make sure to get the feedback from the petitioner. Well, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think the owner would be very amenable to those exact conditions.
Cool. All right. Thank you. I think I understand.
I just want to clarify, my understanding is that this would be conversion of that space. It would not be adding an equivalent amount of floor area. So the only adding is 3,000 square feet. And I wouldn't propose that at this point, maybe we restrict it to the basement. We'll just add that as a cap for flexibility. But then the other two, the covered outdoor patio and parking, would strictly be, those could be converted to floor area. Okay.
Commissioner Hammerschmidt.
I think I have a clarification regarding so the basement is included in floor area. I think the petitioner was talking about not wanting to do basement underneath the parking, but if that wasn't parking anymore for some reason, I guess I'm asking, does the extra 3,000 square feet allow for a full basement if that was something that was decided? It's not high enough? I don't know what
I don't think so, but I'll let Mr. sorry.
I think the first floor is roughly 5,900 square feet in its footprint.
Okay.
It might be a little off on that. So no, I don't think that we could do a full 3,000 square feet, or we could just match the building footprint when we go down. I think that would exceed the 3,000 square feet that we can serve with a single stair. And we'll have to check egress distances, et cetera. It might be that, up to a certain column line, the pricing works out and we do convert something slightly underneath the parking. I don't have a great answer for that because we haven't. Again, we didn't study it very far beyond knowing that we need to take these soils out without knowing how much soil needs to come out exactly.
So is 3,000 sort of arbitrary or no?
That's a code limitation for a single stair. I believe it's 3,000 square feet.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
I pointed to Commissioner Sauvé since she's our code expert. Any other discussion of the proposed motion to amend? We can just do a voice vote. All in favor of the motion, please raise a hand or say yes. That is all of the hands. So now we are back to the main motion, now amended to increase the floor area and allow for the conversion of the parking to usable floor area. Any other discussion of the motion? All right, I think we're ready for a vote, Mr. Leonard.
Commissioner Lee,
Yes.
Commissioner Clark,
Yes.
Commissioner Weich,
Yes.
Commissioner Mills,
Yes.
Commissioner Gibrandal,
Yes.
Commissioner Sauvé,
Yes.
Commissioner Abrams,
Yes.
Commissioner Hammerschmidt.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you very much. Good luck at City Council.
Thank you very much.
All right, now we are on to item 8B, which is the Wizard Fireworks Special Exception Use. Mr. Leonard is moving around all of the folks. Bye, Mr. Kowalski. Trying to see who wrote this staff report.
Mr. Chang, and then Mr. Chang will actually be starting the presentation this evening.
Oh, excellent.
Just give me one moment. Yes, I know Matt is leaving us.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can.
Great. Good evening, Planning Commission. As Mr. Leonard just stated, the petitioner deferred to planning staff to make the PowerPoint presentation. So I'll make the presentation, and he will be here to answer any questions you may have. So give me a second while I am pulling up the PowerPoint. Okay, can you see the presentation?
We can. It's not in full screen mode, but we got.
Give me a second here and we'll hopefully get it there.
Now it is.
All right, excellent. Let's start from here then. Okay, this is the Wizards Fireworks Special Exception Use located at 2449 West Stadium Boulevard, also known as Westgate Shopping Mall. We have the zoning and the aerial maps side by side. As you can see, it's located at the southwest corner of Maple and Jackson Roads. It is zone C3 fringe commercial, and for the most part to the north, to the east, and to the south, it is also zone C3 and has, for the most part, retail commercial gas station type uses. And then to the west, it's zoned AG, but it is bisected by I-94, and that is a cemetery. This is the Alta survey. This is just the northern section of the site where the proposed temporary outdoor sales would occur. The petitioner is proposing a 30 by 50 tent, 1,500 square feet in the orange rectangular area facing Jackson Road. The sales hours being proposed are from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. approximately 3 weeks before the 4th of July and then 5 days before the 4th of July to increase those hours to midnight. What the petitioner has applied for is approximately about 5 weeks of sales here, but it should be noted that temporary outdoor sales can occur for 180 days in a calendar year, so it could be for other like types of Jersey sales or any other type of temporary outdoor sales. The parking lot has 767 parking spaces, and it does have a required range of a minimum of 589 to 689 spaces, so it will not be taking up any required parking space. In fact, it's approximately 10 spaces. And there are barricades to prevent any type of parking or drive-through traffic for the outdoor sales tent. This is an aerial photo of the entire site. As you can see, the tent is on the northern portion of the site. They do have access points to the east and to the west. And they're not being impeded whatsoever. There's also one off of South Maple. And so no traffic or circulation issues. It should be noted for those who have been around on either Planning Commission or at the city for quite some time. The Wizards was actually set up to the south here, and it's the old Quarter Bistro restaurant site, and they had been set up there for, I don't know, maybe the petitioner can answer, but I want to say at least 10 years until it went under construction. And then because it was a new site at Westgate, he had to reapply for his temporary outdoor sales. And here's a view looking east from Westgate parking lot. This is kind of where the Rite Aid is. You can see as you're looking east, you can see kind of the Zingerman's and Jackson Road. And the tent is going to be approximately where the car is, and the barricades will be right there also. Again, here's another view. Jackson Road, there you can also see one of the entry points at Westgate. And a view from Jackson Avenue, which would be kind of looking right where the temporary outdoor sales tent will be located. I also just wanted to add that the planning manager, per the UDC, does have authority to waive the public notification within 1,000 feet for the special exception use and for a complete site plan. So they just submitted an ALTA survey because no development, there's no changes to the site. This is just temporary outdoor sales. That completes my presentation. Staff supports the proposed temporary outdoor sales and like items, and I'm here to answer any questions along with the petitioner.
Thank you. Now I'll open the public hearing. This is an opportunity for persons to speak for up to 3 minutes about the Wizard Fireworks Special Exception Use Approval at 2449 West Stadium. We'll first call on those who are here in council chambers and then those who have joined us remotely to speak. If you're listening by phone, you can press *9. If you're viewing through the web link, you can push the raised hand button. And if you're watching us right now, you can call in at 877-853-5247 and then enter our meeting ID 977-6634-1226. Mr. Leonard will select those who have raised their hand, calling on you by the last 3 digits of your telephone number or your name. When speaking, please move to a quiet area and mute any background sounds. Please also state your name and address at the beginning of your comments. Is there anyone present here who would like to provide public comment? Mr. Garber.
Thank you, Chair Mills. I won't comment on the greenhouse gas implications of this special exception use. I don't think there are any. And I haven't looked at this proposal. I would just want to point out that sales of fireworks is has very marginal, if any, social benefit. And on behalf of combat veterans and animals of all types, I would just say that fireworks are considered a nuisance at best and a psychological hazard at worst. I realize that they're legal in Michigan, but if I recall correctly, that wasn't the case until about 10 years ago when the Snyder administration made a tax grab and legalized sale of fireworks. So these are just some random considerations. I don't feel real strongly about this particular special exception use, but thought I'd speak up for all the people who hate fireworks. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Leonard, is there anyone indicating an interest in speaking?
There is not.
All right, I'll close the public hearing. And did you tell me once upon a time I didn't have to read the whole motion?
We typically read the whole motion.
Oh, okay, I thought we said once upon a time that for the long ones. Okay, I'll speed read. The Ann Arbor City Planning Commission, after hearing all interested persons and reviewing all relevant information, finds the petition to substantially meet the standards in Chapter 55 Unified Development Code, Section 5.29.5 Special Exception Use, and hereby approves the Wizard Fireworks and/or seasonal items special exception use at 2449 West Stadium Boulevard for the temporary outdoor sales of fireworks and seasonal items. This approval is based on the following findings. One, the proposed use will be consistent with the C3 Fringe Local Business District, which provides for commercial activities including retail establishments, offices, and personal services. Two, the proposed use will not adversely impact traffic, pedestrians, bicyclists, circulation, or road intersections based on the location. Jackson Avenue and South Maple Road provides access to the site, and the proposed use is consistent with other surrounding uses' traffic impact. Three, through documentation submitted by the petitioner regarding inventory delivery, security, and staffing of the sales tent, the temporary outdoor sales will be operated in a manner that will not have an adverse impact on the neighboring properties or area and will not have a detrimental impact on natural features. This special exception use approval is based on the following conditions. One, that the petitioner obtaining and maintaining certification from the Michigan Licensing and Regulatory Affairs under the Michigan Fireworks Safety Act, PA 256, enforced by the Michigan Department of Lara BFS Fire Marshals Division. This must be on display along with insurance and must be compliant with the Retail Fireworks Inspection Guide for temporary CFRS facilities and stands, and must be compliant with all applicable codes in NFPA 1124. Two, the petitioner will set up the temporary sales tent as shown on the site plan sheet SP4 and apply for a zoning compliance permit for each sales event. Three, the special exception use tent may not exceed 1,600 square feet and is limited to a maximum of 180 days per calendar year. Four, the petitioner will maintain the operating hours of 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Monday through Sunday and extended until midnight 5 days before 4th of July. And that the Ann Arbor Planning Commission approves the attached site plan, which demonstrates compliance with the applicable special exception use standards as no physical development of the property is proposed. Can I have a commissioner move that? Moved by Commissioner Sauvé, seconded by Commissioner Lee. Discussion? Or questions? Commissioner Abrams?
Am I right in understanding that this approval is in perpetuity? It's not just for this one-time 5-week time period?
That is correct. As long as the petitioner continues to submit for zoning compliance permits when there are temporary outdoor sales, it would be in perpetuity.
But always limited to 180 days per calendar year in perpetuity? Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
Other questions? Commissioner Hammerschmidt.
I had that same question. And then additionally, so everything we've been talking about has really been around fireworks, but it says, recurring sales of fireworks, novelties, jerseys, and other seasonal objects. I mean, that's pretty wide range. I don't know, I guess I just want to know what we're approving the sales of, but maybe that's not our purview and I shouldn't. Go ahead.
Well, as far as from the staff perspective, we wanted to give flexibility. If the petitioner were to come back in and let's say, hey, the Red Wings or the Pistons or the Lions maybe have a good year, they want to sell some type of seasonal items, maybe Christmas trees. We want to just incorporate things that they could also sell there besides just fireworks.
Is the 180 days like consecutive, or could that be split up? Like if they only sold things for 5 weeks, fireworks, that's, only, whatever, for 35 days? So did they get an additional 145 days? But they have to, correct. But they would have to come back.
Maximum limit.
Okay, but if it's not consecutive.
They'd have to come back and get another
yes.
zoning compliance permit. But yes, as long as they would be limited to a total of 180 sales, temporary outdoor sales days per year.
Okay,
But to be clear, it does not have to be consecutive.
right.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Weich.
Just a question for staff. Trying to think of how to word this the best way.
Why?
Well, why is capitalism? I think the question is, the concern I have is what Commissioner Abrams started with, which is that this is a perpetual license. And the reason why it's before us is because the space they occupied is no longer present. So they're applying for a new space. So that's why it's here. And I think my question is there some way for us to do this on an annual basis or a 5-year stretch as opposed to a perpetual? Or maybe the question is, how would Planning Commission revoke this if there was some desire to cease this if it's a perpetual license? Is there a way to do that?
So,
And these are just, it's just the questions that popped in my head. So
for sure. To take it a step further back, over the last 5 or 6 years, we have modified our outdoor sales regulations. And the ordinance has always held longer term, it sounds crazy, longer term temporary sales to a higher standard than shorter term temporary sales. So we provide, for example, some very short term, Mr. Chen can correct me, like 10 days or something like that with just a zoning compliance permit. But when you want to occupy, sort of add an outdoor sales area and potentially go longer than that limited period, that's where the special exception use. And then once that happens, as you saw, we thought it made sense to not limit this strictly to fireworks. You see a lot of language because fireworks bring additional regulations, but given that cost, we thought, let's make sure it's clear that other things could happen. It is possible to add a term or limit. I wouldn't advise it because ultimately the city is making a determination that the standards and criteria for operating this use at this location are appropriate. And why would that change 2 or 5 years from now? So we are making that determination. And like marijuana provisioning centers, for example, this goes with the land. So if we wanted to create it through more of a ongoing or more regular criteria, I would suggest we relook at our ordinance and just look at ways to just do it through a zoning compliance period where we could do it on a more regular basis rather than making that declaration and findings from a land use perspective. Does that help?
And maybe to alleviate some of the concerns from Commissioner Weich, they do have to get a zoning compliance permit when they are coming in for the temporary outdoor sales. And because the tent is greater than 400 square feet, they've applied for a building permit for the tent. So if there were, say, violations or concerns, we could either one, start enforcement or may not be able to reissue any type of permits that would allow for the sales out there.
Yeah, sorry, I missed that. So if they didn't comply with the standards, then the special exception could be revoked. Or if the use wasn't established and maintained over time, I think it's a 3-year period to establish it. It is a 1-year period to seize the use. But I will say that can be, it's not necessarily, sometimes the standard is you have to prove that there was an intention not to do it. It just didn't occur. So as an example, sometimes, say you had an illegal duplex and you didn't rent it. That's different than you renovated it back to a single family home. So the use is discontinued, it might be revoked, or it doesn't meet the conditions. So I'm sorry, I missed that question.
Go ahead.
Is there a way for you, Mr. Leonard, to just note this in your ever-growing list of notes for us to talk about? Because it sounds like in order to change this, we'd have to make an ordinance change. And that isn't the appropriate conversation for this period, but I appreciate Commissioner Abrams bringing this up to get us started.
Any other commissioners with questions or comments? Commissioner Sauvé?
Where this tent used to be, we got new development. Maybe it'll happen again. That's all I look forward to. So I'll support this. But I think it's great street front in a potentially new zoning district. So I think this is a great, I would just say it's a great test to even close down some of the traffic and parking to figure out new patterns within this really large parking block as well. So not thinking about what's in the tent, but what the tent can provide for new situational planning for the area could be great.
I'm curious if staff can rack their brain, if there would be, we have a lot of conditions because of this particular kind of temporary sales use. Is there anything else, any other seasonal sales that have special conditions that we would typically apply that you would want to put on here? Do you understand what I'm saying? Because you're allowing for that flexibility, I just want to see, like, this is clearly a special
Yeah.
regulations, but.
No, it's a good question. The only thing that's coming to mind for me is, it's not quite outdoor sales, but I'm thinking about, in the past, there's been special exception uses for temporary cellular towers associated with football games. And often there are regulations about the corresponding operation of a generator associated with that. So I don't anticipate that would be necessary for this, but that could be a condition. That whatever sales happen, that it's clear that we don't want like a diesel generator running for long periods of time in that parking lot. It seems like a stretch for any sales that you would need that, but that's the only other temporary special exception use condition that comes to mind. Mr. Chang, does anything come to your?
I'm racking my brains to think of any other type of temporary outdoor sales that it's.
I mean, it's sales we get are like apparel, sometimes plants, holiday trees, Christmas trees.
This is a question for the petitioner then, actually, because I was thinking about, like, often in Christmas tree lots, there are lights. How is, does the petitioner know, well, first of all, for fireworks sales, do you anticipate having any electricity, and how are you accessing that? I don't know if you have like lights inside the tent for 9 o'clock. I mean, it's summertime, but.
Mr. Rodriguez, if you can, if you want to address that, you can unmute yourself and address the commission.
We do have the petitioner, right? Okay.
Yeah, he's, the petitioner is, I don't know if he's having technical issues, but not,
Okay.
oh, wait.
Oh.
Raised hand. Let me see if I can unmute the petitioner.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yes, there you
We
go.
can, go ahead.
Okay. I'm so sorry. I've never done this before. Yes, ma'am, we do have a 3,500 watt gasoline generator that runs only at night. We have to have that because the state fire marshal requires us to have lit exit signs on both ends of our tent. So we do have a generator that is running that runs our lights and our exit signs.
Was that the same situation when you were on the other side of the parking lot?
Yes, ma'am. I've been doing it for closer to 15 to 20 years with Mr. Chang's help the last time, and he's also helped me along with this one also. But yes, we were there for close to 20 years with never any violations of any kind. But yes, ma'am.
Okay, so it wasn't, you didn't have like electrical access at the site, at the other part of the parking lot either?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
I don't know how that changes how I think about this. I don't know how that changes how I think about this. So,
Yeah, well, I don't profess to know, but there definitely are specific fire codes for any tent. As Mr. Cheng noted, once a tent gets over a certain size, it is reviewed by both the fire department and the building department, even though it is a temporary structure, to make sure it meets those requirements. I don't profess to know those, but it would be very logical to me that they would be required to have illumination in the event that somebody can find their way out of the tent. So,
yeah. I'm just thinking about it from the perspective of, again, just like we can't clean up natural gas, you know, our grid is getting cleaner. And so as I think I would put this in the category of, as we're thinking about temporary sales, thinking about, it's not just specific to this land use, and so I don't want to pick on this particular one, but thinking in the future about how they will be like getting electricity, because I would imagine that it's not just this use.
I would also say if it's not restricted or required, if the special exception use is approved, I don't know the details, but given its proximity to the public right-of-way, I'm sure Mr. Chang could just sort of raise the question with the building department and the fire department and the petitioner to see if there's a way to supply electricity to that apart from a generator.
Yeah.
I want to be clear that there might be barriers to that I'm not familiar with, but given that it's not located maybe in the middle of a parking lot, maybe there's more or less potential here. I don't know, but we'd be happy to follow up with that conversation just to explore it.
I'll bring it up in commission proposed business when I bring up the conflicting land use buffer and the temporary sales that Commissioner White's already noted. So
I already got them.
just put it in that part. Yeah, and I would also say that as we are making our spaces more EV ready, like there will be more these are old parking lots anyway. Commissioner Gibrandl.
I would just point out that there's a similar relationship that happens with water in that kind of situation with a fire hydrant, where there's a meter that you can get from the city and a backflow preventer that you can just kind of plug right into, and there's a way of tracking it. And so this is maybe something that this city should, really think about, because it just seems like, how can we be having this conversation, like a diesel generator? So if it's been done for water, so clearly it's possible to think about how there can be private interfaces with public utilities in temporary situations where it can be tracked and be safe. So I would challenge the city to come up with a way so that we can do this in a way that makes a lot more sense.
You'd all like to invest in my new solar tent business.
There you go.
With batteries.
Right.
Commissioner Sauvé.
I'm just going to offer this to the petitioner, if you can work with the landlord, that there is at least one parking light that, with some minor modifications, it looks like there aren't any outlets at the base of it, but, with some minor upgrades, and if you're planning on 10, 15 more years of these sales, $500 to add an outlet to the base of that light pole to be able to plug into might actually be a good investment for everyone involved as well. So that I don't think we could require that additional bit, but it's readily accessible within the zoning that you're planning on closing off to vehicular traffic to run a cord for connection there.
Did Mr. raise his hand, or is that left over?
I think
No,
that's
ma'am, I did not. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
No, that's, you're fine.
If I may just add a little bit more background information to, because Mr. Rodriguez, this is the fireworks season now in June, he's already applied for his tent permit and his zoning compliance. So it's ready to get approved. So he may be actually installing the tent tomorrow once the permits are issued tomorrow morning. So I think he's ahead of the game right now as far as getting his permits in. He's already having informal discussions with them. He's already got his fire department approval. So I think these are things that he's going to, possibly look into, but I think he's probably you're going to start seeing his tent set up in the next day or two.
Very good. Anything else? All right, I think we're ready for a vote, Mr. Leonard.
So this is the special exception use motion as presented in the staff report. Commissioner Lee,
Yes.
Commissioner Clark,
Yes.
Commissioner White,
Yes.
Commissioner Mills,
Yes.
Commissioner Gabrandel,
Yes.
Commissioner Sauvé,
Yes.
Commissioner Abrams,
Yes.
Commissioner Hammerschmidt.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously. It's approved.
Very good.
We will,
Thank you,
so despite timing, we will initiate a conversation with all parties, petitioner, building, fire, to see about the opportunities to improve that arrangement.
Thank you.
Well, I want to thank you guys very much. I really appreciate it.
All right, very good, thank you. Item 9 is public comment. This is the final opportunity for persons to speak for up to 3 minutes about any item on the agenda or not. If you're here in person, you can participate, and we'll call on you first. If you're joining remotely, you can press *9, the raised hand button on your phone, the raised hand button through Zoom, or call in 877-853-5247. Our meeting ID is 977-6634-1226. Mr. Leonard will call on those who have raised their hands. Please mute any background sounds so we can hear you clearly. And state your name and address at the beginning of your comments. Would anyone like to participate in the public comment?
Believe it or not, this is not fun for me. Ken Garber again. I guess I get to add 340 Depot to my little bottle cap list of petitioner deflections, evasions, and excuses. I don't really think it needs to be said that you need an engineering study to commit to full electrification. I just bring up again, as I did earlier, 2111 Packard. This developer came in, didn't need any arm twisting, wanted to electrify that mixed residential retail project, and is going to do it, without going through a mechanical engineering study. They have retail as well. I don't think they're concerned about their the retail renters that they're going to have. So, not much more to be said. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Leonard, is there anyone online?
There is not.
All right, let's move on to item 10, commission proposed business. Yes, Mr. Leonard.
I have club with residentially used versus residentially zoned. I have outdoor sales. I am presuming that part of that is, do we need a special exception use for outdoor sales, or would it be better just on a temporary, repeated basis? And included in that should be minimization of fossil fuel impacts like buildings. How can we orient temporary sales to the existing electrical grid?
Yes. Thank you. Any other commission proposed business? Item 11.
One thing.
Sorry, Commissioner Gabrandel.
So this is completely unrelated to anything we've talked about at all, but this has really been bothering me for the last couple of months, which is that, before COVID, people came in here to speak to us. And I think that there's a relationship that happens when people are in front of us and we can see them. And when it's on Zoom and it's just a name, it feels really disembodied to me. And I would like, if they can have the convenience of being home, I think we deserve to be able to actually look each other in the face. I just feel like people can kind of hide behind their cameras sometimes, and I really would like to have the possibility of having a more authentic connection with the people as they present. It doesn't have to be through the whole meeting or anything like that, but while they're speaking or while their team is up or something like that, you know, we've had the benefit of sort of having that human connection in the room for decades and decades and decades, and it feels like it's really sucked back now, like too much. And I think if they have issues with technology, they can come in, because that's the way it's always been. So that's my 2 cents on it. But it's just one of these things that's... Petitioners, yep, exactly. So I feel like there's been some discussions over the last couple months where it's like things have gotten a little heated, and it's like the person is behind their black screen, and I don't like it. I really like to be able to understand facial expression and all those cues that just give us a sense of how the interaction is going. So that's me personally, but again, unrelated to anything you've been talking about, but it's just one of those things that's been getting at me.
Well, so to that, we can work to educate and expect video on from petitioners. But I also want to be clear that thus far, I've been communicating to petitioners that we welcome their participation remotely. We don't have to do that. We could flip the switch and ask for the team or a representative of the team to be in person. So not something we have to decide, but I've been, you see my team is remote, the petitioners are remote. I have still been of the mind of trying to sort of limit the people in this room. If that is having adverse impacts, again, I'm not saying we have to go there, but if we can start communicating immediately with, the expectation to keep videos on. I think it's occasionally there's an issue with IT,
Sure.
but that's pretty rare, I think. But if that is not satisfactory, I just want to be clear, I could take your direction and just start communicating to people that we expect to have them in person for their petitions.
For me personally, I'm okay with them being remote as long as if they're remote, their camera's on during their team's time or while they're speaking at the very least. That's one member out of the entire body here, but I feel like that's kind of the least they can do if they're going to have the convenience of being home, that they can at least be kind of present for their team's presentation.
We'll work on it.
As do I. Thank you. Any other commission proposed business? I don't want to put you on the spot, but I want to acknowledge your presence. Thanks for being here tonight. Are you here with school or with a troop or?
I came here to fulfill America's requirements.
Fantastic. Well, I hope that you learned something about how local government works and that we are all volunteers talking about different things every week. Great. Anything else? Anyone want to make a motion to adjourn? Moved by Commissioner White, seconded by Commissioner Zove. All in favor? Please say yes or raise a hand, and that's all the hands. Thank you, folks. We'll see you on Zoom next week.